Let's call it to order, 7:05. I apologize, I left my glasses at home, and so the agenda and everything else is blurry. I actually am gonna, so under additions and corrections to the agenda, there are a couple of things, because the agenda that got sent out missed some edits that are there. We've added a section, after policy and before other to approve the minutes. That'll probably stay on the standing agenda. And then under new business, there are two extra items. One is a discussion about whether or not this board wants to adopt a consent agenda policy. A lot of the time, consent agenda, there's no discussion about the items under there. You just vote to approve the consent agenda and it gets done. You can use that if there's no discussion going to happen on a policy perhaps, and you can also, it also works for minutes. If you need to correct the minutes, you need to pull it from the consent agenda. If there's a discussion item, you just move to pull the items out of the consent agenda. But otherwise, it just streamlines things that you're going to do anyway. And we can have a whole discussion about it as to whether we think it's a good idea or not. And then I there's a separate agenda item under new business for the governor's letter, which was part of your board packet. Just a brief discussion of that. Anybody else have any additions or corrections to the agenda?
Looks like Newfane's gonna have to appoint another member.
Yeah, that's under we'll get that under correspondence. I have her letter.
Okay.
But yeah, no other additions or corrections. All right, members of the public, you guys here to speak on a certain thing, just kind of observe. Now's your chance to be heard on anything you want to be heard on.
I have some things to say about, one under the curriculum and one under policy E1.
Okay. Mr. Hagee.
When you start talking about elections, I will have some comments from the town perspective. And I also want to...
Are you an official of the town in any capacity at all?
I am chairman of the Board of Civil Authority.
Okay. I just want to get that on the record if you're making town comments that you actually have town
I'm
authority
making
behind
comments as a member of the public, but yes, I have some background and understanding.
you. Okay.
And I also want to discuss at any point in time when we're going to get a piece of paper that tells us what Wyndham can and cannot vote on, as I brought up several meetings ago.
I believe that will probably be a little while. I don't know if there's a timeline for that piece of paper at this point.
That piece of paper should be in place before Wyndham votes on anything, in my opinion.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything they want to bring up at this point? Cheryl?
Is this the public then? It's not necessarily on the agenda, but I wanted to talk about changing the date of our school budget vote, the Leland and Gray, and whether it's an actual, it's not necessarily.
That's not anything that this board would have anything to do with.
Well, actually, Bill, when you and I had a conversation about the possibility of changing when the vote would happen instead of a standalone election, but at town meeting, still by Australian ballot, in an attempt to increase voter participation. So we mentioned it.
Yeah, that would be.
That's what you said, this is for the coming year, I guess, as you.
It would be in 2019 for that
Yeah.
budget, yes.
Yes, exactly. So would that.
Okay, so it wouldn't be the Leland and Gray budget, it would be this board's budget.
Yeah, yes, I mean, for all the towns that are going to vote, and I guess this would be for all the different schools. So anyway, that would be one piece of it, to say, so I don't know whether there's a formal proposal, how would you like to
I don't think this board has actually
discuss-
talked about when its budget would be
Yeah.
adopted yet. We haven't actually
Yeah, and I
had
know
that
it's
conversation,
way in
because
it-
we don't have to adopt a budget for a little while yet, so.
Right,
The
so-
timetable of it.
But as far as changing when that date happens, I know that has to happen well in advance. So-
Actually, because this is a new board with a new budget and not, we can pick a date that makes sense to us for a business and voter, because, like, the other votes took time to move through because there was a process, because there was a date that they had been determined, and it took public action, and they had to be warned and all of that. we don't have we don't have that in place, so we're gonna be putting that in place. So a date that makes sense to us is what, we can just pick a date that makes sense to us as a board.
I guess what I'm just to increase voter participation, what typically has happened in the towns for, I'm just gonna use Leland and Gray as the example here. Last year, last year's budget, there were a total of all 5 towns voting, 415 tallied votes. And just to kind of compare that to.
So you're requesting that we look at putting our
Putting it
budget
on.
vote for this new district on town meeting day by Australian ballot?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because, and my other reason, just using Newfane Town Meeting as an example, just at Newfane Town Meeting last year, the total number of votes at, I guess, its highest point in the day was 448 votes. So even just one of 5 towns would have a higher turnout of voters. So that's what I would like to do, and however, whenever that would come about, I would encourage you to consider that, so it's still, anybody can vote between 9 and 7, you don't have to stay at the town meeting. Those who are there,
Understood.
discuss
Thank
it, so that would be one piece that I would like to suggest. And if you want me to type this up so it's an official
No.
anything, you have it in your notes. All right, the other thing, and I guess, again, for that year's budget, and then I'll present this at the next Leland and Gray school board meeting, that the actual ballot, we discussed this last year, that the actual ballot, the way it's worded, it puts the total amount to be voted, and then it has as a statement in there what it will be, the impact on the equalized pupil spending. So for instance, last year it said, that the equalized pupil spending being 12% higher. What I would like to suggest
That
is,
ballot language is actually in the,
Mandated by the
it's mandated by the statute.
So-
So we can't change
We
that.
can't-
We
can we-
cannot change that. We can't add to it, we can't subtract to it, we cannot change it. It is a formula that the state
Well, then
provides
okay.
that we must use.
okay, just because what I had proposed before.
I understand,
was
but we
just
don't
to-
have any wiggle room at all.
Okay, so maybe if I contact the state, find out, because
You
what
would
would
wanna
be
talk to a
helpful to the
legislator.
voters is, whereas last year's equalized spending is 12% higher than the previous year, in fact, the budget, and this is what I would suggest being added, is the line that this proposed budget, based on last year, is 0.002% higher than the budget for the current year. So equalized spending represents one figure that people see, but how it plays out into the actual budget and the increase or decrease, I'm just always for promoting a well-informed community of voters. And so when you see the equalized spending being 12% higher, that's a frightening percentage. When you see that it actually played out to be 0.002% of an increase over the current budget.
You should probably
That's
put a
the
line in there
difference.
that says, and my student count went from here to here, either up or down, so that they actually
Well,
have that
whatever,
understanding
yeah,
as
I mean,
well.
as people have the opportunity to understand the impact.
But, we're stuck. The statute says we have to do it
All right.
exactly this way,
So,
and that's how we do it.
thanks.
So,
Then that's not,
thank you. Yes,
Who's taking minutes for this meeting, just so I know?
where's Peter?
Peter's not here, so your clerk needs to take minutes. Good question, Rick.
Yeah, I've taken him for granted. Drew, you're the clerk. I can tell you when we called it to order, and right now, all we've had is a couple of
Well then.
suggestions that I have noticed.
Oh, it's excellent. They will not be Peter's minutes, they can assure you.
Oh, they don't have to be. You have to record motions.
That will be it. Thank you. When
Thank
did
you.
Call to order.
7:05.
7:05.
Thank you.
I'd hate to do it, but we could always go to the videotape.
That is an option.
I don't think it's one you're supposed to use, but we do have it. All right, so that's it. Moving right along.
Just review the 2 people that spoke.
Well, you want to stick in the minutes that about the budget that Gerald talked about, the moving the budget date to town meeting by Australian ballot. You can say we discussed the statutory vote language. And then Rick's comments will come later, except for the, Wyndham piece of paper.
Could we get the full names of people?
Sure. My name is Gerald Julian Cisse, and I'm a resident of the town of Newfane and a teacher here at the school.
Mr. Heggie?
My turn?
Sure.
Rick Hagee Townsend.
And
Mike Foley Townsend.
thanks.
Thanks.
All right.
We also have Sean Udu over there as well.
Sean Udu, I'm on the school board at the Townsend Elementary.
Okay, so correspondence, we have the one, I think you all got a copy of it, but we have a resignation letter from Fiona. I asked Al to read it because without my glasses, I'm hopeless. Please.
Okay. Dear Joe, this is from Fiona Chevalier. It has come to my attention that I am ineligible to be a member of the board as an employee at Dover Elementary School. I am employed under the same supervisory union as the board and thus may not serve. It is with sadness that I resign from the board. Please know that I would like to stay involved as a citizen. In addition, I serve as the board president of the Moore Free Library in Newfane. When the MRMUUD board reaches out to involve stakeholders, please consider involving the local public libraries. I would be happy to organize a meeting or share information with the local librarian folk. Should anyone on the board have any questions or would like to be in touch, my contact info is as follows. I don't think I need to.
Yeah, you don't have to read that.
Warmly, Fiona.
Do we have to accept that, Bill?
I think that
I
would
think
be
so,
proper,
yeah,
yes.
okay. You had a comment?
Oh, I just wanted to tell the board that when Fiona was approached to take a job at Dover, I originally gave her the okay because it was a different district. And then further investigation uncovered that it was the umbrella of the supervisory unit, not the individual district. And so she is resigning with she should resign, but the reason she's resigning now is because originally your superintendent gave her incorrect information. So that's why she participated for a while until now. So I just wanted that to be well known, that she did everything that she should have.
Well, originally when she signed up, she wasn't working in Dover.
That is correct. No. Right.
Okay, so we need a motion to accept Fiona's resignation from the board.
I'll make a motion to accept her resignation, since I have to find a replacement and appointment.
I'll second that.
Okay. Anybody want to make any comments before we vote? All right. I do feel badly that she has to leave. I understand, employment comes first. And I do hope that she makes it to some meetings to, her input was valuable, in the little bit of time that we worked together. So, all in favor of accepting Fiona's resignation, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right. Okay, on to new business. We have a curriculum overview. Do you want an introduction?
Hi.
This is our director of curriculum.
Hi, Jen McCusick. Thanks for having me. Bill asked me to put together just a cover sheet of what kind of some background about curriculum, so we were working from the same terms, and to talk a little bit about what's happening in the WCSU.
Yeah, just for a little background, if you guys remember, as we were talking about having the VSBA come and work with us, both Nancy and Fiona asked some really good questions about getting some baseline information of context of what is going on instructionally at the different schools so that this board can start to become well-informed as you guys get prepared to dive deeper into your learning groups and get prepared to make decisions for the future. So I asked our director of curriculum just to give you guys kind of a baseline, and so she's coming tonight.
So I shared a document with you. I don't know if you've had time to look at that, and just a general overview. And in the meantime, we've asked all of our principals to work with their teachers to really outline all the different curriculum that are happening, curricula, if it's plural, curricula that's happening in our schools, and assessment and intervention. And so I think we're about 50% right now of what I've gathered back, and it's a lot of work, and it's really thoughtful work, and I'm glad that we are doing it. And then I'm also here to offer my help should the Student Learning Subcommittee want my help, my support, work with you, meet with you, provide resources, whatever you need. So that's why I'm here. And answer any questions.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, sure.
Does anybody have questions after going through that document? You know, I appreciate the overview. I look forward to hearing what, after you've gathered everything from the different building principles. It'd be nice to kind of hear what's going on next, but there will be a curriculum learning group, I think.
Right.
Something that's like that, yeah.
Is
Yes,
this
sir.
my chance to add in on curriculum?
You bet.
All right, so as a parent, my son's very into technology. And there's a website and a program called Tinker, Tynker. And so it teaches kids computer coding and science and technology. It's taught, according to their website, over 60,000 schools use it. And what's nice about it is it's visual, so compatible pieces of code will fit together, incompatible ones won't. It aligns with Common Core, and for about $3,800, you can get a license for up to 600 students. That includes 12 coding courses and 12 STEM courses. So I would just like to put that in front of the board, and I don't know if you want this piece of paper
Sure.
to check it out and consider it.
What grade is your son?
He's in third.
Okay,
He's already made his own video games and Minecraft mods, and
okay.
does all sorts of hour code things. But I think that there's a lot of, that is where, where the future lies. I mean, if you can make these computers talk to each other, and nowadays with smart textiles and everything else, it's, it'd be good to keep some of that knowledge base right here.
Okay.
Mhm.
I just had one question of you. When the discussions were taking place about Act 46, one of the things that was mentioned was that the supervisory union had a bit of a problem with math curriculum alignment, especially kids coming from the different schools into the junior high were not on the same page. And I don't know if you're finding that, if some things are being done to try to,
I heard that too.
is it true or is it just a story we're hearing?
I think there's some truth in that.
Okay.
I can tell you a little bit about what we've done this year so far.
Okay,
So we started out in August. We had our first 2 professional development days. So pre-K to 6. Marlboro's an exception. They have a bit of a different calendar. So we did a full professional development day with Cornerstone Mathematics, working on problem solving and inquiry with mathematics. And then the second day, myself and 3 of our teachers, which we were calling math teacher leaders, led us in grade level groups, looking at curriculum mapping and creating a scope and sequence for math with that purpose in mind. What we'll call it horizontal alignment, to look at per grade, what we're all supposed to be doing in each grade, and then vertical alignment pre-K through 12. So fast forward, grade level meetings, we're continuing to look at that scope and sequence. We had math professional development again today, pre-K to 6. Tomorrow, those same math teacher leaders and I, we're breaking into groups again, and we're continuing to fine tune and come up with a scope and sequence, which can also sometimes be called a pacing guide or a map, that we're agreeing on which standards we're teaching through units at approximately the same time of year, which is also a big piece and challenging with so many schools. And part of that is we're using the Common Core State Standards and looking at each of those individualized standards under the overarching math principles from National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. Trying really hard not to use acronyms. And then we're using Achieve the Core Math Coherence Maps. So I think Marzano said if you taught all the standards, it would take 23 years to go K to 12. So we're really looking at where the big standards are per grade level, looking at the learning targets and which things we need to cycle back through on. So that's our work continuing tomorrow. And then in the background, when I meet again with grade level teams, we are also looking at our data and using that assessment data to really try to get little dipsticks, I would call them, like just little pieces to understand where our students are, so we can see where our instruction needs more work. So that's a long answer to yes.
Okay.
In the meantime, I'm also starting my work with Leland Gray, which is a little more challenging to have 7, 8, and 9 through 12. But I've been putting my voice out there. They're really heavy in really doing their own work right now on PBGR work and instructional pedagogy. But meeting with math department, meeting with science department, English department. I've met with science department and meeting with English department next. But that's that from the top, from the bottom, and together. So once we have this strong, more of a strong document, which I hope to have, we're going to keep drafting, keep working with, we'll be able to do more pre-K to 12. So,
Okay.
and help with that transition.
Okay.
And I'm thinking a lot about how we can get 6th through 8th grade together as well and make more of a connection.
Uh-huh.
So,
Good, thank you.
thanks. I love talking about this. It connects.
It shows.
I know, like, and done, right? You want-
No.
So, thank you for asking. I appreciate that.
Anyone else have questions regarding curriculum? All right.
So I'm here if you need me. So I'm glad we find it.
Yeah, I
Thank
would
you.
just like to emphasize that when you guys finalize at least some of your members of your learning groups, that somebody from the student learning group make contact with Jen, because she's a resource that can be very supportive to that group as they discover what is happening and what foundation baseline we're at and the kind of places we want to go.
We're going to talk about that. Okay. Next is the town meeting voting discussion. We do have 2 at-large bids for this board coming up. They'll be elected on town meeting day. People will have to take out petitions. I have questions like, there are a number of questions about, like who can run and how much, the technicality thing, like how many signatures do you need, but it is a vote of all the 5. It is a vote of all the towns commingled that gets you elected. It's a commingled vote. And is it 4 or 5 towns?
It is all the members of the West River Modified Unified School District, so it includes Wyndham, Townsend, Jamaica.
Even though Wyndham's only kind of okay. All right, that's the legal questions we're after. So, those, really start thinking about if you want to run for those seats. That'll be a real, you can come from any town. There's 2 Townsend members, but there could be a third if they want an at-large bid. Not that stacking towns makes any difference or anything, but it, the whole reason that was put on there in the beginning with the articles was that, like Brookline and Wyndham, that were limited by population to 1 member. It was sort of, it felt like that gave them a chance to have a larger voice. But really, now that I think about it, it kind of goes against what we're all trying to do anyway. It shouldn't be a town voice. It should be a,
That's why it's a commingled.
it's a total, group voice. But anyway, there's we should start looking at the technical questions so we can actually start
So I
telling.
reached out to our attorney just in preparation, knowing that we were going to talk about this tonight. So if we have any specific questions that you guys want me to follow up with, what I've asked them to do is just kind of lay out exactly what you guys are talking about so that we make sure that we do everything correctly. But I do know it is a commingled vote. I do know that all 5 towns will be voting.
Okay.
So you're gonna have to get a voter registry from each town.
Well, that's what I'm talking with the attorney about, is how to do that. I don't want to make any assumptions. I mean, I have some ideas about how that would work.
Okay.
That in the
You
town
know
of
what I'm
origin,
saying? Because
you
if
would
somebody
get
from
on the
Townsend
ballot, and then it
runs,
would then be on the ballot, but.
Jamaica has to look and see if you have people on Jamaica on your petition, they have to be legal voters. So
That's what we have.
you need a voter registry from each town.
So that whoever's certifying whether you've got a right number of signatures on your petition can see if they're legal voters wherever.
Well, what he's asking is do you have to get certified in all 5 towns? Do you have to get certified in
You
one
only need to
town?
be certified in one town, but I'm saying when it comes time for the vote,
Yes.
You could have, was it 90 signatures I think you need? Is that right?
Again, until I talk to the attorney, man,
I
Not
remember
making
that,
any
I remember that
commitments.
number floating around last year when we,
Sure.
but the thing is you could run from Townsend, you could put your petition into the Townsend town clerk,
Yeah,
or you could put in the Jamaica town clerk. It doesn't mean you put in any clerk,
but they gotta be able to check.
but they gotta be able to check each town to make sure that everybody's a registered voter.
So you've reached out to the attorney. We should have something
Yes.
back probably by the next meeting
I
to
wanted to
sort
talk
of.
about it now so that on December 18th, every single thing is answered, ready to go.
So let's
because-
think about the questions that we have, like, you know, you've asked those questions. Let's think about any other questions we might have that we want to get answered so that in December, we can say, oh, hey, here's how it works, folks. And people can, you know, go get their petitions and, you know, we'll have yard signs and stuff, because everybody will want to be on this board.
Well, I think there might be questions that we don't even know what to ask, so I mean, if the attorney has,
There's been
all the
other
parameters
Act
and-
46, you know,
Right, so-
at-large votes.
Yeah.
so
right,
We'll learn from,
Yeah, we borrowed that from somebody, and I don't remember who, but.
I don't know, probably Brattleboro. They never got across the finish line, but they designed it in a way that they were gonna have that type of.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Are you through with your discussion before I make some points?
Make away.
Point away.
Townsend, as you know, does not do Australian ballot except at town meeting, except for once every 4 years. That's the presidential election. Australian ballot is a financial and human resources drain. It requires, if you're doing it at town meeting, it requires that somebody be able to miss town meeting and be willing to miss town meeting to go sit downstairs and check people off. I think as you're approaching Townsend for all your technical needs, you're going to find that you're now regarded as a new entity. You have your own clerk, you have your own statutory obligations, and you should not look to the town to do anything for you. You should be looking to set up your own polls, print your own ballots, hire the people to take care of the polling places during the day, and to count. And all previous courtesies given to Leland Gray are pretty much gone now. This is starting fresh. So you got to deal with the statutory requirements that you have to deal with, and don't go look into the town clerk. The town clerk is not your employee. I'm just giving you a warning. You've got more technical details to worry about.
I can echo that was some of the feelings that Brookline was having as well. They do not have an Australian ballot, and they had a really hard time when we voted for this board, and there was a lot of things to work through.
So, Bill, maybe we wanted to consult with the attorney or even the state when the town is saying that it's not their responsibility to administer that sort of public balloting. Do we have the authority to create our own, like, civil authority? You know, I mean, if the Board of Civil Authority, that's who counts votes. If they're not going to count votes as a courtesy or whatever, you know, are they now a private contractor and we have to hire them, or do we create our own, you know, district vote counters? I guess if that's the way it's going to go, then we have to find out how much infrastructure we have to create of our own.
I can definitely find that out.
We'll be baking a lot of brownies.
I don't bake.
That's good. No, that's
Okay.
why I wanted to bring this all up.
All right. Anybody else? Drew? You look curious.
No, my department.
Nope. Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to hear what he has to say. Okay, consent agenda. I gave you a brief overview when I was adding it to the agenda. You know, we find it useful at Leland and Gray. We've had it for several years. I don't know if any other boards do it. Do you guys?
We do it.
Okay, so a lot of other boards do it. It just kind of streamlines things. but I didn't want to just add it to the agenda as an item before discussing it with you guys and you know, before discussing it with the board and actually, you know, agreeing that that's something that belongs on the, that we'd like to take that step. So, any thoughts?
What would we include in it?
Problem-
Or I'll tell you what we include, and you want to mention as well?
Go ahead.
We include the principal's report, superintendent's report, and the minutes. You know, those 3 items.
I think we could include
We
those.
just include minutes and pay orders.
We've also included policies when we're adopting the policies because they get warned and discussed, and then they get warned for adoption. Like, we have 5 policies on tonight that are, 5 that are warned for adoption. We discussed them at the last meeting. You know, unless somebody else has something to bring up, then we can pull them out. At Leland and Gray, we would have those in the consent agenda as well. Well, then we would have to get them
Well,
pulled.
what you could do is, but if it's only one that he has, you can.
Yeah,
put
we'd
them
pull
all.
that one to
Just
discuss.
pull that one to the side.
So, you know, anybody have anything else they want to add to that?
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
So we've got
Do you need a
superintendent's report.
motion on that?
Do we want to include the items?
Yeah, I think probably that makes it the board's will if we have a motion to add a consent agenda to the standing agenda.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to add a consent agenda to our agendas for the West River Modified Union Education District.
I'll second it.
Ken and Nancy. Any discussion on that? All right, all in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Bye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, next month we got a consent agenda. Okay, in your board packet, and here, if you want a copy, folks, is a letter from Governor Scott to the education leaders. So it went to the legislators, and I think it then went to superintendents and was asked to be shared down to boards. Talking about sort of the state of education funding and what we need to do. And, you know, I know you were asked to share it with boards, right, Bill?
I was.
You want to talk about it like you did the other night at the Leland and Gray meeting, just briefly?
The governor's letter?
Yeah,
So the governor
give us the overview.
has a 5-page letter that basically lays out his understanding that there's going to be $80 million deficit in the education fund, $50 million, which will be a structural deficit. It's starting the year with a $50 million deficit, and then $30 million is assumed on an average of 3% increase in the budgets that are being built currently for $80 million, and $10 million represents 1 cent on the statewide property tax. There are some very specific suggestions, I think on page 3, paragraph 3. Did I nail it?
I don't know, I can't see it.
Where the governor strongly encourages school boards to take action in response to if you have increasing enrollment or decreasing enrollment. I believe that he shares that if you have increasing enrollment, he encourages you not to spend more than 2.5% per increased student.
page
And
4,
if you have,
paragraph
is it page 4?
Page 4, paragraph 3, yep.
Page 4, paragraph 3. And then if you have decreasing enrollment, that you should be doing, I think the phrase is everything in your power to reduce expenditures to fall in line with falling enrollments. Something along that line. Am I close?
Yeah, well, that's what he says, but
Right.
on the news today, they were talking about this deficit and everything, and they were talking about legislators and the governor wanted to see us close some schools.
I
Just to let
believe
you-
that says that in paragraph 3,
Yeah.
that it says everything, including consolidation
Yes.
of grades, schools, does it say buildings as well? Whatever.
Well, that was the basic is if you have 2 buildings running where you can put that amount of students into one building, that you should consolidate.
So this is kind of a precursor to a education summit that the governor will be hosting. He has not given a specific date yet, but it's supposed to be early in December, in which he'll be inviting representatives from the Vermont School Boards Association, the Vermont Superintendents Association, the Vermont Principals Association, legislators, I think I hit the groups, in which he would like to have an open conversation about how we can allocate the resources of the education funds in our state to adequately meet the needs of our students in a more affordable fashion. I think that's the crux.
Yeah, and we'll hear more, I'm sure.
Yeah,
The legislative session ramps up and we'll see what they're gonna impose this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think last year at the State of the State address, people were commenting that it would have been nice to have this information earlier, and I think that the governor is responding to that feedback by providing this information 3 months earlier,
Right.
or 2 months earlier.
So, just something to keep in mind as we move forward, folks. Any other commentary on this? All right. Lori, transition grant. You want to talk about that?
Okay, I have two things for you. The one that I sent, that is the narrative of the grants. Okay, so there were basically, in terms of grants, really 3 grants. The transition grant and the merger grant are one of the 150,000. But really, as grants go, they're broken into 3 grants. So the study grant, if you look on page 2 of this, it's number 1. That was the exploration grant. That was $5,000. That was the basic in and out for consultancy. Then number 2 was the merger grant, the Act 46 merger grant, which was broken up into 2 $20,000 grants, so a total of $40,000. Now, out of that $40,000, $34,000 was reimbursed from the AOE because the promotional items were disallowed. But the total expenditures for the grant was $52,000. So there's a gap of $17,000.
Lori, what were the promotional items?
The promotional items were media services, not taping, but what was provided by
Anita Raphael.
Anita, yeah.
Yeah, the blogs,
The blogs, yeah, the
press
social media.
releases, the social media, all of that outreach they disallowed.
Right. Some of the mailings were disallowed as well, or the mailings were disallowed. So, so what happens with a grant is that there's a grant period. So the grant period ended on 6/30/17, and it left a negative balance of that $17,000. That grant can't be used, or the next grant, the $150,000 grant, you can't go back and charge this $17,000 to it. You can't ever go backwards on a grant. So
Are you sure?
I'm positive.
I know.
So what's happening is that the $150,000 grant, only $34,000 of it will come out of it, will be deducted, because that's what you actually spent that was allowable. And so that leaves a balance of $115,000. Is everybody tracking with me here? Okay, all right. So the business office, central office is requesting $45,000 for the database conversion, creation and conversion, which I'll run through short presentation here in a couple seconds. So there's some things to consider. What are we going to do with the $17,000? That has to be billed back to the schools that participated, in my mind. The other thing to consider is there are some consultants out there that have been through transition into new mergers, and I name one here who runs School Operation Solutions, Marilyn Fredericks. The legal fees, what are the legal fees going to be? And then promotional expenses, which are allowable. I have double checked that. They are absolutely allowable under the transition grant. So those are some things that we can talk about as we move through this process. So I'll go ahead and do this. You guys want to just peek up there for a minute? I have to go back and forth with my glasses. You can see it for. All right. All right, so what's happening at the state level? So this is what is going on. So by the year 2020, there is a mandated new chart of accounts that will be in place for all school districts. The state has sent out an RFP for a statewide financial management system. The bids are back and demonstrations are going on right now as we speak. The state hopes to make a decision by spring, and the system will not be mandatory. So you won't have to join the statewide system, but it will be available for a cost. There'll be a cost to transition. So this is what the chart of accounts looks like. This is actually what Townsend's chart of account looks like at the top. And you can see that the bottom is what the mandatory chart of accounts will be. So automation is very important because, you know, it doesn't seem like very many more numbers, but when you're keying it, it is. So we're moving towards that for efficiency. So what's the 30,000 foot view of what has to happen through this? I know that last meeting, I believe you discussed some of this as far as the conversion is concerned. So we will export some of the data out of the old databases. We'll need to wash it, make sure that we don't have duplicates, then we'll import clean data, and then we'll build the new data for the new database. So I have a little chart here, picture. All right, so these are all the databases that we're talking about now that we run separately, okay? So we'll be exporting human resource records, payroll information, vendors, balance sheet accounts. There's no reason to create those new in the new database. So we'll bring those out and we'll, you know, you're gonna have the same vendor. Jamaica may use the same vendor as Newbrook. We only want, you know, one of those obviously in the new database. So then we'll bring them into the new database and then we'll build the new chart of accounts in the database. We'll have to map some accounts that are coming in to the new chart of accounts. We'll want to probably build an electronic requisition system. Leland and Gray has been using what we call EREX for, I don't know how many years, many, many years, way before my time. And that will be the way that it's a control, because you're going to now have somebody in Jamaica requesting supplies. And you might have the same day somebody in Newbrook requesting supplies. So an electronic requisition system is going to be very important for control. Also, an employee self-service system. This also has been used at Wyndham Central and Leland and Gray for the last year. So nobody gets pay stubs anymore. They go up online, the employees can look at them, they can put in their leave, and all of that is tracked electronically. And there might be one more. Can you push it up a little bit? I don't know. Maybe it's not. Okay. That's all right. No. Just go back one tab. Yeah. There. Okay, that's all right. So you can go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so here are some decision points that we all need to talk about. So there's a few different options at this point. There are many mergers that are, or districts that are moving to an entirely new system. And I've talked to two business managers that have spent between 80 and 90K on going to a new Tyler Infinite Visions is what they went to. I don't know what they had previous to that, so it may be they had something where they had to go to a new system because of the chart of accounts changing. To go with the statewide system when that becomes available, Tyler is one of the bidders, and I will tell you that there's a lot of Tyler users now, so we don't know, but it would make sense for the state to use Tyler. So
that means they won't, if it makes sense.
well, all right. Or we could stay with our current financial management system, which is Harris School Solutions, and that's where the $35,000 came into play. So that's the quick overview of what we're looking at that has to happen. Now, if you go back to the picture, at the same time that this new database is going to be operational, these are still going to be running because you have to close out the year. So, you know, you've got 3 months, 4 months probably of overlap of all of those databases and then that new one. And then all the other ones that we do too. But, you know, you can't just close these down as of June 30th. So that's what has to happen. And that's the cost that I'm proposing as part of the $45,000.
So the timeline would be June 30th, 2019? switch
So
over?
July 1st is when this database goes live. And, you know, so everything will start running out of that database, but at the same time, you're closing up these. Now, this is a new entity, so as far as like expenses are concerned and building a budget, that will be done in that database. So that will be all new information. But we'll, you know, be using some of this, you know, foundational knowledge here that we have in the old databases. So, do you guys have a question?
I got a question.
Okay, well,
What about river valleys?
so I gave this
District.
presentation to them.
Doesn't make any, as I'm saying, we both have to be on the same page.
Right. So
Both
I gave this
districts.
same presentation to them a couple weeks ago.
Well, what he's saying is we couldn't say, well, let's go with that Tyler one, and they couldn't, and they
And
would
they'll
say,
say go with-
let's go with the cheap one.
Right.
So
Yes,
we
that-
have to decide sort of as a supervisory union
We do.
what we want to do.
So,
And we don't have we don't have any idea of the cost of the statewide system for a little while yet. It could be, I mean, it probably won't be less than 35, right?
no,
No.
Will it be more than 80 or 90?
no. I would say
It'd be
prob-
somewhere in the middle?
I would say in the middle, yeah.
Is there
50
an
to 70.
advantage to going with that statewide system? Because eventually it's gonna be one day it'll be mandatory, right?
So there's a lot of pluses with going with a statewide system. They, according to RFP, they're going to be able to come in to the statewide system and pull the data. So the, you know, multiple reports that we do, particularly the stat book, the statistical report that's due in August is, I mean, it's every expenditure, every revenue, every balance sheet account has to be reported to the state for every entity. So by the state, you know, having the access to the system, they will be able to come in and get that information. So huge time saver.
When would that be operational, the statewide system?
Well, and that's what we're not sure of. So there's a lot of unknowns, and my fear is that it's taken this long, and we're talking years, to get to this point. It would be hard for me to wait when I know that we have to be operational by 7/1/2019.
Right, because we were building the budget for the next year. We start in October, you're starting 2 months before that,
Right.
prepping.
So, yeah,
So
this
if
would
we
have been
pick
nice.
one system and the state goes to another system, we're gonna have to change over again and spend more money.
It's possible if they make it mandatory. Now, right now, they're saying that they're not going to make it mandatory to use the statewide system. There also is the, you know, school of thought that the statewide system may have some bugs to be worked out in the first couple of years. So, you know, maybe 5 years down the road, we make the switch to the statewide system, something like that, you know, once they've worked out the bugs, and that's another, you know.
Our current provider, can they transition, or they'll be transitioning to the new code system?
Yes, they can, their system is adaptable to that, so. And that may be why some places had to go to the Tyler, because their system could not adapt to the new. Nemrick, for one, is, I know they can't, you know, that's a fairly old system, they can't adapt to the new structure. So Dover's, you know, Dover and Wardsboro, who make up River Valleys, Dover's has a NEMRIC system, so all of that has to, all that data has to come out and be, it's actually probably, that one will be hand done for the most part. Well, I'm not sure how the export import will work.
And how is that gonna work with, now they're talking about combining supervisory unions?
Yeah, that's, I'm trying to get
Sorry,
this
Bill.
far so we can get, you know, operational by 7/1.
We gotta take the chunks when we can, man,
Yeah,
right?
well, you
This is where
know,
we're
I just
at.
hate to see us go and pick a system, do that system, then the state turns around and says, oh, now you gotta spend more money on this system, because this is the one that we wanna go to. And I really don't think that it's fair to the taxpayers that the state's gonna turn around and say, well, you have to switch over now, and then you're gonna have to switch over again when we decide what we wanna do. So, I'm just throwing that out there, so talk to your legislators.
Okay.
Well, we don't have a lot of control about that, but I mean, you're probably the closest to this, so what's your thinking as to the best course for us now?
So my recommendation would be to continue talking with Harris School Solutions. I've been in conversation with them. They understand where we are and where we need to go. And then see what happens with the statewide system. I mean, we have a little bit of time here that we can, you know, look at it. If they pick one by the spring and we can turn that right around, we can see how much it costs and what it looks like. And, you know, there is also, there's the training issue too, right? So that's a big part of this, why I would recommend to stay with our current system for a while. We're gonna be running these databases over here, we're gonna be running the new database. Now we're gonna throw in a new system. You know, that's really not really cost effective, I think, in the long run.
Are we pleased with the provider?
It has its up and downs like every other financial management system, you know?
The
I
devil you
mean,
know, though.
it is the devil, you know?
Yeah.
And they've been I have to say, their customer service is excellent. We pay, so we also pay a yearly fee for this, which we pay now, which is about $14,000 a year for them to host the system and provide us with customer service. So we probably call them, I would say, 3 times a week. And, you know, they get right back to us. We work through issues. We just had a trainer actually come out to help us work through some difficult system problems that we were having, and it was very helpful. So I am comfortable with the support that we're getting. There's some functionality. I'd love for it to do more, but I'm typically always pushing the envelope on that one, so.
One more statement, question, whatever. Is it possible for us to go to the state and say, okay, which one are you leaning towards? And if you're leaning towards that one, why don't you give us a grant to pilot your program? And this way, the state can pay for it instead of us having to pay twice.
Well, we are getting grant money to pay for this,
Okay.
right? That's part of, that's the
Yeah, we
45,000.
want more grant money though.
I can
does
certainly
everyone.
send an email to the person that is in charge of this.
Well,
Project?
I just, you know, if they're gonna wind up tending to go toward one way and they need somebody to pilot it and they're offering to train the people to do it, why not use that money versus this money? Just throwing that out there and then you
It
can use
never
this money
hurts to
for more.
ask.
That's right.
Right? Hence the solar. Never hurts to ask.
Never hurts to ask. You never know, you might get $1,000 check. in the
That's
mail.
right. So yes, I
Or a
will,
couple.
I will ask.
Anybody else have questions for Lori? Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
So, in addition to that piece, there was discussion last meeting about, you know, reaching out to the Two Rivers District to talk about sort of fair distribution of the grant dollars. And I had a couple of conversations with their board chair, and you know, both of us acknowledge that it's really the board's decision, but we thought, looking at how things were, how the two districts shaped up in terms of pupil size and everything else, that if we did a 2/3, 1/3 split of the money, and then agreed to try and work on the things that we know we both have to do, like legal fees and some of the publication stuff and some of the PR that we're all going to be doing.
Right?
Yeah. No, Rich didn't beat me up that bad. That was a pretty fair division of the remaining assets, and that we would really try and work together on the expenses that we could call joint expenses. And then we started talking about, well, and then if we're doing a joint expenditure, then are we paying 2/3 and they're paying 1/3 if we're splitting the money that way? And we said we could. That probably made sense, but again, we talked to our boards. But, I'm open to, we certainly can discuss it and then we can go back and agree with them. But that kind of, in terms of pupil size, that made sense. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it seems fair.
That's normally how we divvy up all the other bills anyway. Right? If you think about it.
Yeah. Yes, Alicia.
Just for clarity for a very tired person right now. The 45,000 for this is once for out of the grant or twice out of the grant? Once for us and once for them, or
That's a
just
good
once
question.
altogether?
No, good question, it's once.
Once altogether out of the grant, okay. And the 17.9, that's just ours. Okay, thank you.
No.
The 17.9
that's
isn't
what
just
we owe.
ours.
I know, that's our bill, I'm sorry, that's our bill, it's not a
Well,
shared
not
bill
just
between
West
them.
Rivers, I'm sorry, yeah.
That
No,
belongs
it
to West River and
belongs
Two
the
River.
whole-
Okay, so that is gonna be split up by a 2/3, 1/3 bill.
Well, I don't know if that should be
Well, and
split
that-
up 2/3, 1/3, because you'll find out that pretty much what was spent was pretty much even in PR from both of them. So if we're gonna wind up paying 2/3 of the PR bill and we only used half of the PR, doesn't make
Well,
any sense.
Okay, but it's a shared
That
expense.
bill, I think technically, shouldn't that go back to the districts that were forming it? So, Leland and Gray, Newbrook, Townsend, Jamaica, Wyndham, everybody that was involved in the process should get a share in that. Everybody that took Act 46 to a vote would get that bill, I
Yes.
think.
No,
I think
what I'm-
that's the way it
What I'm
works.
saying is, if they charge us so much for a website and charge them the same amount for a website, right? We would wind up paying 2/3 of that when we should only be paying half.
Are you talking about out of the 17 that we overspent?
Yes.
But the 17's not into the 2/3, 1/3 split. The 17,000 actually would be split among the districts that formed this. So like West
But-
River District's not gonna pay any of that bill. Our individual boards
Right.
that make up West River will
Right,
pay
but
that.
it still winds up that the districts that are represented at this table would wind up paying 2/3.
Oh, I see what you mean. Well, but each district, it would be broken down by different,
By actual expense.
yeah, it would be
It should,
broken
it
down.
No,
should, that's what I'm
Brookline,
saying.
Woodson
We
has
have
to pay back theirs.
we have to clarify, is it gonna be broken down to Dover and Warsboro spent X amount of dollars on PR
That's a
that
good point.
wasn't billable?
It's-
And the
it's
West
probably
River
best
District.
just to do it by ADM, to be honest, to split it up by
But,
ADM.
here's the problem. The problem is, we didn't get these services per ADM. We got them split down the middle. They had theirs, and we had ours. So it shouldn't be split that way because it wasn't used that way.
Are there any individual expenses? Like did our board spend something that they didn't spend, or is it all split
It was pretty even.
pretty even? Okay.
She was billing the individual committees, wasn't she?
She was, I
Yes.
did not go to that level of detail.
But no, she was just billing the individual committees. And it did work out to be about even. Each committee spent about the same amount of money.
Right.
So really, you split the 17 in half,
So
and
the-
then their side pays half and our side pays half.
Yes, that's.
Is what
right.
you're, it's what
That's-
you're
That's
advocating.
fair and equitable, since we can't be equal. Sorry, using the consultant's words there.
Whatever you guys decide to do, it's gotta be between your
Right.
new board and that
Well,
other board.
yeah, we're gonna have to talk to the other board and
I
see
have
what they
no
wanna do.
power in this game.
I can certainly take that to them and see what they think of that idea they may counter propose that we just break it up by ADM or some other thing, and we'll have to decide which way we wanna go, but,
Well, maybe we should take a vote of this board if we should go ADM, or if we should go what was actually spent by each forming district.
well, we could, I was just, we can
Even if
just
it's a
talk
straw
about it.
poll, but,
Well, right, but we could just talk about it with them and say, it's like, hey, this is what they're kind of thinking is the fair way to, our board was kind of thinking this was the fair and equitable way to do it, where, it's split and then,
well, if you're gonna spend money that came out of a grant that you thought you were getting this money for a grant to pay for it, and then turn around and say, well, oh no, the whole supervisory union has to pay for it now because these two school districts wanted to do this. That's not fair.
which, if your example actually has people in it, I'm not sure which school districts you think were spending the money that.
Well, you had two sides. You have the West Rivers side, or the West River side and the River Valley side, were the two that were gonna form districts, correct?
Right.
Side by side,
Yeah.
right? So if West River spent $10,000 on PR, and the other district, River Valleys, spent $10,000, and if you divide that 2/3, 1/3, we're paying, 2/3 of 20,000 when we only spent 10,000.
Right, but if we were just talking about taking the $17,000 deficit, splitting it in half, and then West River deals with one half internally amongst their forming districts, and Two Rivers deals with their half among their districts.
Right.
So that does what you want, and I can propose
Right.
that to the other board.
But that's what I'm saying, is that's why the other way isn't fair.
Right, they may not like that way and may propose, we can only ask that that's the way they do it. We have to agree on it in the end. I don't think we can impose our will on them, but I would certainly go talk to them about it. And, they were
We'll go by
certainly.
ADM.
So, Joe, why
Yeah.
don't I break it down, and then we can look at it again?
Okay,
Does that sound good?
is that, I was trying to save you that work, but
Yeah, that's okay.
thank you. We can do that. All right,
Thank you.
but going
Thank you.
forward with the new grant money, 2/3,
Okay.
1/3 work for you guys? For the remaining money, not the deficit that we have to settle up amongst the districts, but the other?
Yes, providing that one thing is that anything that we can double up on, do it.
Right. We've already.
That we don't have a duplicated expense.
That's, since
That's
it
the
all
logical-
flows through
that's-
Bill anyway, Bill will
No,
do
I mean,
that,
anytime I
that
talk
he's
to the
committed to
attorney,
save that money.
I'm asking both questions, right?
All right, good,
Just think how much money we would have saved if we would have just did that with the PR person.
yeah, that's next.
What do you think about, so one of the items to consider was having a consultant that walks through the merger. Because there are things that, none of us have been through this before.
Mhm.
And that's what I was proposing before as well, to think about, it doesn't have to be decided tonight, but to think about having a consultant to help us walk through what assets need to transfer. And, they've been through this a few times, so they have an outline of what needs to be done by when in order to be operational by 7/1/19.
And the cost of that would be?
It's $135 an hour, so we would have to be specific to what we wanted, and,
No,
it would be for
we'll
both
wing it.
boards. We'll wing it.
We'll wing it. $35 an hour.
I thought that was part of your transition that you had blocked off already as the business office.
No, that didn't include that.
Okay.
Although if
I just thought it
I'm
was.
still working on the financial management of the Harris School to try to get the cost down a little bit, so maybe there's some wiggle room, but
No, I just thought it was. I personally, I think having somebody who's done it before so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel is the way to go. I mean, even at $135 an hour, that's pretty cheap money for somebody who's done this, because what you're going to spend hours and hours doing, they're going to say, oh, just do this.
right, so what she does in particular is she talks with the central office once a week. She sets up a Gantt chart of, when things are needed to be done, and then checks in once a week. So we could, back into a figure, and I can have that for you next time.
Okay, and
Does
then
that sound okay?
the other district that would be a shared expense between
That
the
would
two
be a shared
districts.
expense.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a
Question
great
would be,
idea.
would it be 2/3, 1/3?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'll
let's clarify that.
all right, so I'll do some more research on that and get some better figures.
Okay.
Thank you.
One last thing about, well, I don't know, there may be more, but one last thing about the grant money is, since we're not operational, but we at some point started voting ourselves salaries as boards, do we pay those out of the grant money, or do we wait until we actually have a budget to start paying salaries to boards?
You as a board didn't vote yourself salaries. At your annual meeting,
Right.
salaries were
Were-
voted on by the public.
Right, so the public voted us salaries.
Correct.
Do we get those when we become operational, or do those come out of the grant money for us now?
Well,
I mean,
since it's
it
an
was
an-
just a question.
I can ask the attorney, but well, I don't want to say.
You're guessing it's not until we're operational?
No, I would guess it would be on an annual basis.
Okay,
I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be, but I will check.
okay. Anything else in the?
And we're not
in
doing
the-
that by ADM either, right?
No, no, that was the public voted us,
Public
I think it's
decided.
like 400, it's same as Leland Road. 450 and 500 for the chair or something.
That's a good question.
Okay, anything else out of the grant money, folks? All right. Next. Oh yeah, the VSBA workshop follow-up. So, we spent 6 hours working with the VSBA, coming up with the vision documents. We're supposed to get more from, what was her first name? Horton. Aren't we supposed to get some emails from her?
Sue?
Susan?
Susan?
To get your timeline.
Yeah,
gonna type up your
she's gonna
timeline.
get a timeline to us, and we'll start working on that. I know, like, the one thing that came out of that whole, visioning thing was at the end when we were doing the different learning groups, and that's a separate agenda item. So if there was more that people wanted to talk about from the VSBA, I apologize for the.
No. I put it on there because two things. One
Two things?
was that the timeline that you guys developed will be coming. And then the second one was if you guys had discussed having a July retreat. And I would just like to encourage you guys to decide if you want to do that so that we can book it. And I think it's really important because I'd really like you guys to set a date for that in the next month or two, so that when your community engagement group starts going around speaking, you have that date set, you can point to that date, you can encourage people to come to. Because the 6 months between January and that retreat are going to be really important to make sure that we get a lot of people involved.
Oh, speaking of the timeline, I believe Newbrook was supposed to look at revisiting the building audits
Yes, that was.
in November.
Yes,
We had our November meeting,
yes.
and the Newbrook board's fine with it if it costs around $3,000.
So that
Not
informs
exactly,
our
it could be a little
facilities and grounds.
higher, a little lower,
Great.
so.
So I'm gonna just, if, with your permission, I would put on the next agenda, a discussion about the July board retreat, and then
Okay.
I will have the timeline from the consultant at that time as well. Does
Okay.
that work for you guys?
Yeah, that's great. I think the July meeting is important. I mean, I think that was valuable time with the VSBA. And I think in 6 months, having somebody basically who's looked at it with us once go, okay, where are you now? What happened here? How this, who has the timeline? I think that's a great thing for us. So bring your calendars at the next meeting so we can block out time in July. The one thing that came out of those at the very end were the learning groups, and those are probably a good idea. Since we're not actually like operational, apparently we can't really have committees. We have learning groups, so we ended up with a student learning sort of curriculum learning group, a facilities buildings learning group, and a communications learning group. That was the three that came out of that actual exercise with VSBA. Whether we keep those as the only three, we expand on those three, we definitely want, and each one of those groups came up internally with a timeline for what they would do and what their work was and how it comes, and I think Susan will probably be sending all of that to us. But we should start thinking about, if those are the only learning groups we want, what the work in each of those learning groups is going to be, in addition to anything we may have already come up with, and if we're going to need more, and then sort of we picked those randomly based on where we were sitting at the table. So if there's a learning group that you're particularly interested in, then let's solidify membership in those various groups, so that we can start the work. I know we have, as part of this board, a buildings committee, so it would kind of make sense that became the buildings learning group, right? But we could certainly take more people, or people could shift and move around as they want. The communications learning group is the one that's got the fastest timeline, because what we discussed during the VSBA workshops was that, that got some public outreach, and that we would be ready to start talking to the public by town meeting. And then we would spend from town meeting sort of to when it was time to have a budget vote. And that would be the cycle of communicating and public outreach and those meetings and stuff. So that was the one that needed to ramp up the fastest and probably had the most intense work up front. And then the student learning curriculum group, you'd be working with Director of Curriculum, Jen, and you'd be working, probably more closely with Bill and figuring out how to align those things. You may have some meetings with other principals as your committee, as you do some exploration. The point of these is partially so that we don't have to do all of this work as a whole board, and then the smaller sub-learning group can take the deeper dive for all of us and then let us know what to do, and then we would have we would have a recommendation from that committee, and ask some questions, and then probably make our decisions. So I don't know if you have to pick your committees tonight or committee tonight, learning group. But certainly think about it so that we can solidify membership in those learning groups by the next meeting, so we can really get going on them.
When will we have those from Susan?
The next meeting.
Next meeting.
You'll have it before the next meeting.
Before the next meeting? Okay. So, anybody thoughts on that? All right. Next is the policies. We have 5 policies warned for adoption tonight. I know we have comment on one of them. Since we discussed them at the last meeting, we would, barring your comment, we would probably just move to adopt them.
All right, well,
So-
okay. I got some handouts, Bill, do you wanna pass these down? I can take one for you if you want.
Which policy is it you
It's
wanted
the,
to discuss?
It's the parental involvement policy and the parent-school compact, it's policy E1.
Okay.
Title 1 for
Yeah, the Title I, yeah. And I'll start out by saying, overall, it's a good policy, but there's some areas that it needs a little work on. And basically, there's my understanding, and I've talked with a lawyer for the Vermont Department of AOE who agrees with my understanding. These policies, procedures, compacts, they're all supposed to be developed upon and agreed upon with meaningful parental involvement. You'll see on top I have an email from Mary Malloy, the State Director of Title I. She even gives a draft framework, but even that draft framework, the two highlighted parts, that they're gonna develop these with meaningful parental involvement. So that's, and then I've also attached 20 U.S. Code 6318. And that also says that these policies, procedures have to be developed with meaningful parental involvement. So where the E1 goes astray is it has, on the first page, it has the superintendent or his or her designee shall develop an LEA level parental involvement compact. And then below that, it says each building principal or his or her designee shall develop a school-level parental involvement compact. So that, you don't have to be a lawyer to read the plain language that says it's got to be there, and that's not there. So that's my chief concern. There's also a concern in the footnotes. Footnote number 5 says that an LEA-level compact isn't required. I didn't attach the policy because I figured you guys had it, but it says, I'll read right from it. So it says 20 U.S. Code 6318, which is what I've given you guys a copy of, requiring each LEA receiving Title I Part A funds to develop jointly with, agree on, and distribute to parents of participating children a written parental involvement policy. This requirement is accomplished with the model policy by requiring the superintendent or his or her designee to develop an LEA level compact in accordance with Title I policy requirement. A compact as such is not required of LEAs under Title I, although a compact is required of Title I schools. The use of a compact by LEAs is suggested here in order to minimize the extent to which procedures must be made part of board policies. And so that just goes to basic protections, right? The board's the board, the superintendent, he's got his role, the principals have their roles. And I, as a citizen, it concerns me that if this policy is adopted, that the board does no longer has a vote. It's minimizing the board's involvement. I think that's an important protection. We've had some issues already this year where if this policy was already adopted, there'd be nothing we could do right now. I'm having a meeting with Bill on one thing, I'm talking to the school board at TES about the same policy, and at the end of the day, those, in my view, those protections are important, and it's very plain, whether it's me saying it, whether it's Claire O'Shaughnessy, the lawyer for the Vermont Department of Education, who has told me I'm absolutely on track with this, or whether it's Mary Malloy, the State Director of Title I, it all says the same thing. It's supposed to be done with meaningful parental involvement, not done in isolation, and then maybe they get comments later.
Okay, well, I would say that we probably want to pull that policy out of our adoption tonight and, get some guidance of our own here.
So I would just say that the Townsend School Board directed the superintendent to contact the legal counsel of the Vermont School Boards Association and to bring back at their next meeting a recommendation on the questions that Mike has thoughtfully brought up. And so I would...
Could we pile on to
I
that?
would suggest that possibly the West River District would direct the superintendent to do the same.
Yes.
And is that going to be, that's going to definitely address chapters 20 U.S. Code 6318?
It's going to be a legal opinion from the legal counsel of the Vermont School Boards Association, of which this board is a member.
But just for clarity.
Sure.
Just so that I mean, a legal opinion on the policy that they most likely drafted is one thing, but the issue is in how it jives with federal law, right? You can't pass a policy that doesn't, that conflicts with federal law,
It'll
and
be
specifically this one, 6318.
So it'll be an opinion from the Vermont School Boards Association legal counsel, and then the board will decide what they would like to do with that information.
Referencing 6318.
Referencing E1 and all of its footnotes.
Okay, just you guys are aware that this policy is right now live in all the other school districts, right? Okay.
So, and things work okay now. So we.
Is it live in every other school
Yeah,
district?
Yes.
it's live in Townsend, it's live in.
It's not live in Townsend.
It should be,
No.
then they're not up to date.
It's rewarned.
That's why it's.
Well, they're not up to date, shame on you. Point my finger over here.
No, well, years ago, I had a tenant, I had to evict him, and I went to my lawyer, and he's like, I said, my lease says 30 days, so I want to give him 30 days notice. He's like, Mike, you can't do it. Vermont law is 60 days, you got to give 60 days notice. It's that simple. You can't have a policy that flies in the face of federal law. So maybe the rest of the district needs to update their policies too. And now you guys have an opinion from the State Director of Title I Services for Vermont AOE.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so
That's,
we'll just pull this one
yeah, pull E1.
until we
and-
get further clarification from the lawyers and the state. And
Any other? Yeah,
Hopefully-
yeah,
hopefully
we'll
have
get
an
an
answer
opinion
before
from,
we're-
we'll get an opinion from the lawyer, and, Bill will
Our
do
meeting's
that
on December
research.
11th.
And it'll be before our meeting, so we'll know.
So does that mean this policy is continuing to be warned at this point? Or do we, since we pull it,
Well,
do we have to re-warn it?
no, it's warned, it's not adopted.
does this
So it
policy
stays
still
warned.
have the No Child Left Behind language in it? Because that was part of the Townsend issue, was it was still referencing No Child Left Behind versus ESSA. So that's why they rewarned it.
We can look at that as well.
I don't think ours
No.
does, but we'll
No,
look.
it doesn't. It does.
It doesn't.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. The technical question that Drew raised, though, if we pull it out, if we adopt D1, D2, D3,
So right now.
D6 and
it has been
F1,
warned,
it's
right?
been warned, right? It's warned for adoption tonight. If we
You're
don't
scheduled to
adopt it
take
tonight,
action. You're not going to take action.
so does it stay
It
warned? Do we have
remains
to
warned as
rewarn?
is, but if you, as Mike brings up, if you're going to make material changes, then you would have to.
Then we'd have to rewind it. Okay. Thank you. That clarifies it. All right.
So it just stays as warned.
It just
until-
stays warned the way it is, but if we
If
change it,
if
then we would
change-
have to
Of course,
rewarn
if
it.
it changes,
Correct.
then we have to rewarn.
But if we just decide that it's fine for some reason,
Okay, then I'd like to make a motion to adopt D1, D2, D5, D6, and F7.
F1?
Or
F1,
F1. Sorry about that.
it's okay.
We already did F7.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion of those policies? All right, all in favor of adopting those policies, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Okay, we have 3 meetings worth of minutes to approve. We have October 14th, October 23rd, and October 26th. We just need a motion to approve each or all, or
I'll
however
make
you
a
would do it.
motion to approve all 3 sets of minutes. The 2 were the trainings, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Those are
There was really
8-page.
no,
We didn't take any action, but Peter did do 8 pages worth of
Right.
documentation for us. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion of any of those minutes? I think Peter's 8 pages of each minute of each meeting will, be really nice. It's very detailed. It'll certainly refresh some memories. Don't get Drew's minutes going. All right, all in favor of approving the minutes of October 14th, October 23rd, and October 30th, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Still carries. The ayes do have it. All right, any other business for tonight's meeting?
Nope, just like to let you know, they're clearing the field for the solar field.
I saw that.
See that?
All right, one more motion, folks.
I'd make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
You have Meg's email.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We're out.
Thank you so much, all you public who has been